Warning. The following scenes may contain references to power pages and portals which some listeners may find disturbing, especially if you've struggled with poor training in the past. Hey all, Franco Musso here. Yes, I've hacked your podcast feed. I've held John and Mike hostage, but don't worry, I got my wires crossed and I'm actually paying them a small ransom in the form of sponsorship. Go figure. So, by popular demand, I'm cooking up 2 brand new offerings to help you get your portal projects off the ground in 2024. The first is my group coaching program launching in March. Join me and a cohort of other budding portal makers for live coaching sessions, weekly live training, office hours, Q&A, and surgeries. I'll guide you through the process from zero to launch, all at a fraction of the cost of hiring a freelancer or a contractor. It's like having a trusted partner on hand, helping you avoid the pitfalls, saving you a ton of money, headache, and time. Plus, you're bound to learn lots from others in the group as we discuss their experiences, challenges, and solutions. To apply, head on over to francomusso.com/group-coaching. You can now take your fingers out of your ears and enjoy the awesome that is Sprint Zero.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us on this episode of the Sprint Zero podcast. My name is John Russell, and I'm here with my co-partner, crab in crime, Mike Gowland. Hello, Mike. How are you?
Hello, Mike. How are you?
Good. Well, I mean, my name's not Mike. Have you done your name change to Lewis or?
Yeah, no. I'm still Mike. So
okay, great. Okay, that's good to know. Today we are joined by Ryan Johnston. Ryan has spent the majority of his career in not-for-profits, where he leveraged the incredible efficiencies and capabilities of Power Platform to advance mission-driven objectives. Alongside Power Platform, Ryan has spent over 25 years as a full-stack web developer, experience that influences his creative processes of making Power Apps that are both functional and beautiful. He's passionate about volunteerism and serving others, having launched a coffee shop dedicated to raising funds for at-risk children and led teams to volunteer across America and Nicaragua, Mexico and Ukraine. He's married, father of 3, has 2 music degrees and is an avid skier to boot. Ryan, welcome to the show. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, guys. Great to be here. Thanks so much for having me.
No, thank you for coming on. Really great to have you.
That was a good intro. You've got your fingers in a lot of pies.
I do, man. It's you read that and it just wears me out just listening.
We might need to hire you to write the other intros.
It's all good. It's all good.
So welcome to the show, Ryan. And we'd like to get to know Ryan Johnston more. I know that was quite a long intro there, but can you tell us a little bit about your journey into Power Platform and where exactly you came from? You mentioned about being a web developer, and you've been doing that for 25 years. So where did it all start for you?
Yeah. So, like so many people in Power Platform, it seems like we often come from some unconventional backgrounds. And I think that's one of the things I love the most about getting to know people in the space. I think my story is no different. I actually did my first paid web development gig as a 13-year-old. I was in 8th grade and kind of caught the bug, so to speak. And so spent really my entire rest of my sort of elementary, middle school, high school time learning to become a web developer. My dad was a career IT guy, had a small business doing web marketing for bed and breakfasts in our home state of Colorado. And so I was part of the company as we grew, took over the company through college and then beyond. And so really just grew and grew as a web developer, primarily freelance work in my own business. And then once I got out of college, I really I developed this love for kind of for nonprofit work, for working in churches, and so I actually went to college for music as a singer, and then went on to get a degree in choral conducting, and went on to spend 16 years working at a large church in a suburb of Dallas, Texas. And that's where I've been, and actually am currently wrapping up that role, and so I'm part-time there right now. But I came on to handle music, the music department, but then write apps for the church as part of my role and responsibility. Kept up the chops, continued to run a couple of businesses on the side that did web marketing, or at least leveraged various elements of my computer science background. And then in the last couple of years, have really moved into a lot more of a leadership role at the church, and found myself, I had no time to keep writing apps for the church as a full stack developer. And had somebody at Microsoft, a friend and mentor of mine who was part of the church, tell me about Power Platform. Was like, dude, you gotta upskill, man. You gotta learn some new stuff, because Perl was my back-end language of choice for years. And, it's a dead language. And he was like, oh, you got to learn something new, dude. Oh, check out Power Platform. And I was like, what is this? And once I got into it, I was like, this is amazing, because now I could create like even better apps than what I could as a full stack developer in a tenth of the time. And suddenly I now had time to get through this backlog of tools that I was wanting to create for our organization, and I could do it with Power Platform. And so I fell in love with it. And then about a year ago, my wife and I began to feel like it was time for us to make a change for our family. We wanted to move back to Colorado, where we're from. And so we began to look at making Power Platform our permanent full-time role. And so, that was the sort of the journey that we went on. And in fact, just started my a full-time role as a Power Platform senior functional consultant in the last few days, and excited about all of that. So pumped.
Nice. So you, I think that was like going to be our next question. It sounds like you're in a really exciting time at the moment. Sounds like there's quite a lot of changes, moving back to Colorado and then landing this new gig. So do you want to tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so I'll begin with the end. I just started as a senior consultant with Shane Young at Power Apps 911. Which to me is just an incredible thing. And it really, I think the great takeaway, and I think what could be great for our listeners here, is to understand the power of community and how this came about. Because at the end of the day, what I've just shared is that, my role has primarily been an internal dev role, in a nonprofit organization, and not one bit of full-time Power Platform development experience, which isn't kind of your, traditional journey to become a software developer, and especially to end up at a company, with, Shane Young at the helm. He's the GOAT. He's the guy everybody looks to. And most of us learned everything that we know about Power Platform watching his YouTube videos, right? Yeah. And so what happened was, my mentor, who worked for Microsoft, was really keen to get me on at Microsoft. And so we began a process back in December of last year to really start getting to know a bunch of people at Microsoft, one, to know the company, understand what was important about it, and then build some great connections. And as part of that process, someone suggested that I should make a presentation and do a demo on one of the Microsoft Power Platform community calls. So I was like, all right, that sounds like a good idea. It gives me an opportunity even just to practice demoing something for interviews, because I'd never had to do that. And so I signed up for the call. They put me on a January call, and I did a presentation on UI UX design in Power Apps. And what I didn't know until the call started was that Shane Young was on the call, and as of January became one of the co-hosts of the Microsoft Power Platform community Teams call. And so, super nervous. It's like, oh my goodness, like, I'd better pull one out of the hat here and
close the people tab on Teams.
That's right. Yeah. Oh my Lord. And so I did my presentation, felt good about it. Of course, had a mic failure in the middle of it. It was everything, right?
Yeah, I remember that. That mic. You handled that so well as well.
Oh, I appreciate it. Well, I mean, what do you do? Like grace under fire, right? So
Yeah.
it went well. Shane had some very kind, complimentary things to say, and it was. So there was two things. The first thing that it did is because I've been so internal and I'm not on a team where I was at. I had no idea where my work stood in terms of like, how do people do power apps? I came at this so unconventionally. And what I discovered in that was that there was a real gap in the market in terms of training and education for UI UX content, specifically related to power apps. And that happened to be what I covered. And I had just a ton of people reach out to me on LinkedIn after that conversation, and ultimately led me to start a YouTube channel, which is just kind of, for being as young as it is kind of blown up. But it's really shown me that there's a real need for UI UX content and for that conversation to be part of Power Apps training. But it also, apparently, because I covered that, was was something that sort of set me apart and became sort of my niche. And so a couple of weeks after that call, I had posted the little open to work thing on my LinkedIn because I had applied for a couple of roles at Microsoft at that point, and none of those panned out, which was, we knew it was a long shot anyway. And so I put open to work on my profile, and Shane actually reached out to me and said, "Hey, I see you've got open to work. What are you looking for?" I shared with him what I was looking for, which was basically a functional consultant role at that point, or pre-sales or something, something in the space. And he invited me to apply for a consultant role that he was about to open up at his company, Power Apps 911. And so I did and went through the process. And 4 weeks later, I was offered a position, which I just started as of the recording of this podcast. I am 2 days in. So
nice.
And how are you finding it?
I mean, I'm loving it. I'm sitting here wearing my jogger pants and loving being at home with my wife. And as we move to Colorado, we're going to be homeschooling our kids, so the family's going to be together. And then at the end of the day, I was bummed that I didn't get on at Microsoft. But the reason I was bummed is because I love the corporate culture there. I love kind of the way that they do things. I love the passion for excellence. And all of those are things that exist with the corporate culture at Power Apps 911. But I also get that small company. Everyone knows each other. I've got an amazing manager, and I'm really pumped about the opportunity. And, I've already got some cool projects that I've been informed that I'll be part of. And I'm really excited. I love the creative process. I'm one of those guys that comes at software development as a creative at heart, not as an engineer. The engineering is there to support the creative effort. And so I love that now, then, rather than being, just creating a couple of apps a year for the same company, I'm going to get to create just tons of things, just looking at everybody's timesheets and seeing what projects they're on. I'm like, oh, that sounds interesting. Oh, that's exciting. So I'm really, really pumped and ready to get rocking and rolling.
How are you finding the timesheets?
I told my manager yesterday, I'm like, listen, 16 years of my career, I have never done a timesheet. So you're going to have to tell me if I'm doing this right, too much detail, too little. And I'm going to have to set daily reminders because I have never tracked my time. In fact, that was one of the big questions in my interview. Was they were asking about some of my demo apps, like, how long did it take you to create this? And I'm like, I have no idea. I'm going to take a shot in the dark here. So it's great. They've got me on I'm going to start a project here in the next few days. That's an internal app that they want me to do some UI UX work on. And we're going to see how long it takes me and figure out, kind of set a benchmark before we throw me into billable hours make sure that I don't cost the company a fortune. So
Yeah, nice.
It's funny. I said exactly the same thing to ANS when I started. I said in 16 years I've never filled in a timesheet. They tried, but I've never done it.
Same with me. I mean, I was at a consultancy before ANS, but before that, no, I was like 20 years without filling in timesheets. Yeah.
Well, that's encouraging to hear that I'm not, I'm not the only guy who's coming in completely.
You're not alone, and you're probably not going to be the only person that forgets to fill them in either.
That's good.
I remind Mike.
Yeah.
That's great. I love it.
So, Ryan, you have a background in web development. Did you find it easy to transfer those skills into the Power Platform world? And what challenges did you face when you started diving into Power Platform, or like Canvas apps specifically?
Yeah, great question. I think that if you're going to come into Power Platform as a pro dev, I don't think that there's an easier or better way to do it than as a full stack web developer. Because when you think about it, the Power App Maker experience, the Canvas App Maker experience is really like a WYSIWYG, what you see is what you get, front end designer. I worked in Dreamweaver before I started doing, more CMS stuff. But, it's a great front end designer. But the thing is, it's not just the front end designer. It's also all the JavaScript. If you were writing custom JavaScript, well, that's all now in the Power App Maker. And so that translates beautifully. And then if there was some kind of a tool that I would have typically used, some kind of backend code, some kind of server side scripting, that is just Power Automate. And so that's kind of how I see it in my head. If something I would do as a front-end designer, that's going to happen in the Power App Maker. If it's something that I would do with server-side scripting, that's going to happen in Power Automate. And then because I also did all the data processing and data modeling, then it's very easy to understand data and understand how Power Apps interact with data. And I was fluent in SQL, so I can work well in SQL. I can work well in Dataverse. SharePoint we use a lot because it's free. And so understanding all those concepts, it made it a really, really easy transition. And I know that there's a lot of pro devs that hate Power Platform. And I think that some of that comes from one, I think some of them are scared that it's going to take their jobs, which I don't think is an unreasonable fear because it does make things happen so fast, which also means you ought to get to know low code, no code, because it's not the only tool for the future, but it is a tool. And if you don't learn it, I think you're at risk of getting left behind.
Yeah.
But I think the other piece of it is that as a pro dev, if all you're dealing with is back end and you've never had to design an interface, let's be honest, that shows in a lot of Power Apps that you see out there where there is no attention given to the way it looks. And you say, okay, this person either doesn't have a design background or they came from, writing C# their whole life and have never had to think about how it looks.
Or we came from writing C# console apps.
Right, exactly. Give me a DOS interface and this will be great. So yeah, it's that. So I think that having that particularly full stack web background is really helpful. And I think if even someone comes in with a front end background, they're going to have an uphill road to learn the Power Automate concepts. But I really feel like I lucked into it by having the background I have. It's made the transition easy. But it's also had its challenges because, there are things that I expect it to do, things that I want it to do that I could write like 4 lines of server-side code to make it happen. But in Power Automate, I've got to jump through 100 hoops to drag 100 boxes around and apply to all and looping and stuff that's nowhere as intuitive as it should be. And so sometimes I will overthink things that somebody who didn't have that background, they pop in and knock it out in 5 minutes flat. And I just beat my head against the wall trying to reinvent the wheel.
But it's actually really cool to have those two ways of thinking in the same platform.
Yeah, I totally agree. It is. It's one of those things that, as I get past some of those little challenges, I realize, okay, being able to operate in both worlds is incredibly helpful. And it just, again, it opens up the creative opportunities massively. And so as a creative, I just love it. And every update that comes out, for the most part, solve a problem or remove a barrier that, heretofore had been a frustration.
Yeah, I like how you used for the most part as well.
That
Yeah.
All
power,
right, John,
it's like,
we'll stop talking technical for a minute.
So yeah, stepping away from like the technical side for a moment, then, and what kind of essential skills, stroke soft skills, do you think you're bringing from not for profit into consultancy?
oh, it's such a great question. You know, the classic the classic story is that with a software engineer, you know, you just toss a pizza under the door and a soda every now and then, shut them in, and never let them talk to a client. Because the reality is, as technical people, we can be very dry and very boring and talk over the heads of our clients, and which makes them feel foolish and stupid. And nobody wants to feel foolish and stupid. The beauty of my role has been that it is a very public, very it's a very public facing role. I'm in front of a lot of people a lot of the time. And so I've had to develop a lot of public speaking skills. I've had to teach a lot. And so being able to come in with an ability to communicate is absolutely critical, particularly if in this role where, you know, I'm not just going to be sitting there pounding out apps, but I'm going to be the guy, you know, talking to the clients. Power Apps 911 in particular, you know, we all know Shane's YouTube channel. We know that he does a lot of educational content. They have their Power Platform University, which is a huge program. And so, you know, part of the reason that I think I got selected for the role was that I'm going to bring in that ability to communicate on screen, to communicate with clients. And so the ability to communicate, not just being a nerd, and I'm a nerd, I mean, at the core, our team in the company, we're nerds of a feather. And I love that.
Nerds of a feather. Brilliant. That's real good.
Episode title.
Yeah, we've got Power Patch Kids is one of the other teams. I just love it. So, like, I embrace my nerddom, but you've got to be able to turn it on and off. You know, Dale Carnegie wrote the classic, How to Win Friends and Influence People, and it talks about the importance of identifying your audience and understanding how they communicate and communicating in a way that they understand. And sometimes as techies, as engineers, as nerds, we just get so caught up in the tech that we forget that communication is probably the most important skill that any of us can have. It doesn't matter whether or not you're in sales, everyone's in sales, even if it means selling yourself. And at the end of the day, that comes down to communication and how you present yourself.
Yeah, it's a very good point.
Sorry, I'm working on definitely because I'm terrible for that. Just being I was, but I have got better.
And that what you said, so Mike, that's what's so great is I've talked to so many people who feel like you've either got it or you don't. And the reality is, like, everybody's going to have certain skills that they just naturally, you know, they're naturally more gifted in one area or another, but there are very few things that you can't learn. And I think that whether it's leadership, you know, there's so many great books. You know, all of John Maxwell's content is amazing, you know, on 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership. If you want to up your leadership, and he talks about everybody has the first law of leadership is the law of the lid, that everybody has a natural ceiling for any of their skill sets. And once you hit that ceiling, you have to raise the lid, raise the ceiling. And whether that's communication or sales or leadership, it's a matter of practice and working at it. And everybody has that ability to improve their communication. You know, Mike, you and I, we're in this awesome 90-day mentoring challenge with Mark Smith.
Yeah.
And that has been an amazing tool, I know, for a lot of people to practice their communication and to get out of their comfort zone, you know, finding places, safe places where you can fail forward and not be judged for it and not, you know, lose your job because you said the wrong thing. Learn to upskill those communication chops, and you'll become so much more valuable as a team member. And it just makes life more fun, you know, when you're not afraid to communicate with people.
Yeah. And I think one of the things that I've learned is that when you do have someone that you're speaking to that is obviously annoyed about something, it usually boils down to at some point they haven't been listened to.
Yeah.
And I learned that quite early on, and it's something that I use on a daily basis, even with my kids. If my kid comes home from school and she's like really irate about something, I'll just say, come on, what's happened to your day? And maybe someone hasn't asked her that question yet, and I can actually see her face change, like, oh, someone's actually listening to me at the moment. So yeah, it's an interesting one, and I think those kind of essential stroke soft skills are very important in consultancy.
Absolutely.
So now heading back over to Canvas apps, like how important is styling for you in Canvas apps? And do you have any bugbears with Canvas apps theming? I'm, to be honest, me asking that question, that should have really probably come from Mike, I think.
No, but you're starting your journey in Canvas apps, John.
A little bit, yeah. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, I think it's one of these things where the joy with which a user experiences an app is going to very much determine how it's going to determine its longevity. If it's a good quality user experience, I mean, I've got apps that I've made that are 15 years old and they're still being used because they just work and they're a pleasure to use. If an app is a pleasure to use, it's going to last longer. It's going to be more easily adopted. If you're a company and you're creating a new tool for your sales team, and you really want them to use it 100%, but it's a total pain in the neck and not as user friendly as whatever they were using before, adoption is going to be a real bear. But if you create something that looks good, that is pleasant to use, that has a quality user experience, that is coupled with a quality user interface, then adoption is going to become much easier and that app is going to last a lot longer. I also think that doing your research and understanding and planning the user experience before you ever start making is a key part of the process, because you not only are able to kind of identify the pitfalls of your own design before you ever start designing, but you are also able to, you're able to do testing and, put it in front of key people before you ever start coding to make sure that you're understanding the requirements of the app by mocking things up and working out that user interface and that user experience. So there's some real pragmatic reasons to make that a priority at the front end of the design process. As far as like Canvas apps and the issues with it, I will say that in general, I think the Canvas app maker is fantastic. And I mean, it's so much faster to create user interfaces that are up and running and actually doing stuff so much faster than the old days. That said, there are some severe limitations still compared to somebody who's going to just come in and, create a bespoke, web app from scratch and code the whole thing. I think right now the biggest weakness of Canvas apps is the lack of a universal style sheets. So in HTML, in web design, we have style sheets which are created either by an external CSS file. We have all the styling for the whole site is contained in one file, and then it just applies to everything. You decide you want to change your color, you change it one spot in a style sheet, and it propagates to the entire website. There is nothing like that baked in to Power Apps. The closest thing that I've ever done is kind of, I create, I'll create like a SharePoint list or a data source where I store all my colors. And then I pull all of those in as named formulas in each app that I create. But like, if I add a color, well, then I've got to go into every app for that org and add that as its own name formula and pull that color in. There's just no easy way to do it. I mean, you could create a Power Automate flow that loops through every list, creates a variable, sends it back. Like, it can be done, but it's a total pain in the neck.
And that's a lot of overhead just to get the colors right.
Tons of overhead. And so what I don't understand is why they don't. My hope is that they create some kind of a theming engine, because let's be honest, at the end of the day, A Canvas app is just a web app. It has the ability to be styled. It has the ability to do all this stuff because it is just a web browser app with a bunch of JavaScript and CSS. And to create some way for us to take a little more control of that would be amazing. And so I'm hoping that that's coming. I don't really see them going that way, like with the modern controls, where they're kind of giving us their themes that they want us to use, which are completely inadequate. I don't think I'll ever use those. I'm looking for more customization more easily in terms of styling. I think that's one of the biggest failures right now.
It's interesting you say that because I think the way that they're going with those modern controls is that by having them be accessible but fairly sort of like static in their look, and literally you put an accent, a colour on it, and then that's your theming. I think they're going down that route to make it quicker, but then at the same time that you remove that customization that I think a lot of makers over the years have sort of like prided themselves in doing. So if you look at like Christine from the UK, yourself with your content, like there's a lot of things that you can do with Canvas apps at the moment. A lot of it is around using that HTML text control,
right?
But there's so much you can do, and it's almost like that's sort not being taken away because that's still there. But like I think they're going to a point where they actually want to make it more cookie cutter, if that's the right term.
Yeah, I agree with that, and I honestly think that's the wrong direction for them to go. I think that the idea that Power Apps' greatest abilities exist in the hands of a citizen developer and a no-coder, low-coder, you can do some amazing things with it with low-code, no-code. But I think the real power of Power Platform comes when it's put in the hands of somebody who can customize it, because they're going to be able to create, let's be honest, the kinds of things that we're used to using as consumers. When I pull up my phone and I load up Google Play or the Apple App Store and I download a quality app, I expect it to look super sharp. I expect it to be on brand for the company. I expect it to work really nicely, and I expect it to be super sleek and smooth. And the reality is if Power Apps is really going to completely disrupt the market, it's got to be able to produce the kind of apps that people are used to using. And I feel like right now, most Power Apps don't look like what people are used to using. They look a little more elementary. They look very boxy. They look very square. They don't even look like Windows 11. Like if Windows is going to create theming, let's make it look like modern Windows theming. It looks like stuff that came out in the early 2000s is really what it looks like. And so I think the modern controls and the modern theming will be helpful to kind of help somebody with no design background to make it look a bit better. I think that's good. But I really hope that alongside that, they continue to increase the customization options that the pro coders and those with the background and the education, that we can fully leverage the platform for what it really should be capable of doing.
Yeah, completely agree. And I think now it's time for Uncomfortable Corner.
Haha.
So Ryan, when was the last time you felt uncomfortable in or outside of work? Explain how you felt, how you managed to get through it, and what did you learn from it about yourself, your skills, or your emotions? And maybe what would you do differently if you were in a similar position next time?
So I would say that the area that has been the most important for me in terms of growth is where I experienced difficulty, and that was in setting boundaries. And so as my job grew, 16 years at my previous work, I grew into a lot of leadership roles, but I really struggled to let go of a lot of the creative things that, hey, no one's going to do it as well as I can, so I'm going to do it, which is a real trap, honestly. And I got myself in a place where I was putting way too much emphasis on my work, and I was, not giving my family the attention that they needed. It ended up creating some real challenges in my marriage with my wife. And we, a couple of years ago now, actually started going through marriage counseling together. And through that process, really discovered that, I'd really allowed myself to become a workaholic. And I had become very resistant to my wife's both verbal and nonverbal pleas to spend more time as a father and as a husband and less time working. And so when I became aware of that, it shocked me to my core and really put me in a spot where I had to make some hard choices. I did, at that time, I began to make some changes about how I carried myself at the office and began to, say no to things that I had not historically said no to. It took some uncomfortable conversations with, the leadership at the organization of, there was a level of expectation of what Ryan could do and was willing to do. And all of a sudden, Ryan wasn't willing to do that anymore, which meant like we were needing to either bring on additional team members or we were going to have to alter our objectives as an organization in terms of what we were going to accomplish. And that meant some uncomfortable conversations. I wouldn't say that all of those conversations necessarily went well. They didn't. There were some hard conversations. But the thing was, I had come to the conclusion that whatever happened, my family was first. And so if I was prepared, my wife was prepared, that if the organization decided that they would only have me if I gave 175% of me, then we were prepared to go ahead and step away. What ended up happening is our leadership, in particular, the senior leader of the organization, he was kind of going through his own version of that in his own life and family. And we were sort of going through it together. And he and I are like best of friends. And so he was very gracious about my journey. And we ended up working together to kind of craft a healthier version of what my job description looked like. And it also was something where what he encouraged me to do is like, look, man, if somebody, and this is a Dave Ramsey principle. Most of people in the States know Dave Ramsey as like a financial guru on how to manage your money, but he's also got great leadership material. And he has this concept that really rocked my world where he said, if somebody can do something 80% as well as you can, let them do it, resource them to do it. They'll probably become better than you by the end. And that was really hard for me because an 80% is a B minus, and I don't do B minus work. I don't do stuff 80%. I do stuff at 110%. And so it was hard for me to let go. But once I started letting go of stuff, really honing my leadership chops, having those hard conversations with leadership, the last year of my role at the organization has been great. And I've been in a much healthier place, and I've been willing to have those hard calls. I know there are companies out there that they're going to work, they're going to get every single thing they can out of a team member. And I just have to say, you have to be willing. I had to be willing to say, if I get fired over this, I'm willing to, because my family comes first. And I only have one family, I only have one wife. I only have these 3 kids, and I've got to put them first.
This is probably a difficult question to answer, maybe, because I think about this quite a lot. Do you think you would be in the same position like you were if you didn't have a wife and kids?
Great question. There's no question that having a wife and kids means that you have to invest time that you wouldn't have to if you didn't have them. I definitely know friends of mine, particularly younger friends who are not married, who don't have kids, who they are workaholics. But I will say they have been just as susceptible to burnout as I was. In fact, I just had a conversation over the weekend with a former colleague of mine who is in her 20s. She's single, has no children, and she had to step away from the organization that she was at recently because she got burned out. because I think she allowed herself that mentality of, oh, I don't have a wife, I don't have kids, so I don't have to invest in rest. I don't have to invest in outside relationships. And I think that whether you have a family or not, it's probably still very important to have those boundaries that you set for the office, that you're only going to put in X number of hours. And outside of those hours, you are going to invest in yourself. You're going to invest in rest. I'm a Christian, and so I try to follow certain biblical principles in the way that I operate in life. And one of the key principles that, as Christians, at least in America, I don't know if it's this way in Europe, I feel it's probably pretty similar, but we really struggle with the concept of Sabbath, of rest, and giving ourselves a day out of the week to do nothing. And, it's a concept that, other people groups have understood for thousands of years, but I think as Westerners, we really struggle with it. And so whether or not you've got that family that kind of forces you to think about it, or you just have to discipline yourself to think about it, I think that setting those boundaries is very, very important, and giving yourself rest, whatever that means for you, is critical to your mental health and longevity in the business.
Yeah. I think also, I think there's a fine line between being a workaholic and passion. So there's a blur there a little bit that I sometimes, I don't think I would say I'm a workaholic, but I can get engrossed in work to the point where it's a little to do with other things as well, but sometimes where I'll forget to have some lunch, for example. But I'm also passionate about what I'm doing and who I'm working for and who I'm working with. So I suppose it's about finding the balance about enjoying work, but also walking away from it. And
I completely agree.
Knowing when that point is.
Yeah, and for me, it was really hard because, like, I was working for 16 years in nonprofit. I was, investing in other people's lives. I was making a difference. I wasn't, I think that you can be just as passionate about something when you're creating a product that enhances people's lives in a commercial context. For me, because I was working in a ministry context where it was like, really making a difference in people's lives and counseling people and leading people to make, spiritual decisions, it becomes really easy to blur the line between what you're doing as just a volunteer because you're passionate about it and what's work, what's the difference. And the thing is, I leverage that passion as a justification for not not spending the time and investing in my family the way that I should have. And so that's one of the things that, I've been very open and honest with the Power Ups 911 team about is like, hey, listen, boundaries are super important to me. I want to do a great job. I want to do good work, but like, I need to be able to shut it off. And at least in my early conversations with my manager, she seems to have a very, very similar life philosophy. And I've been told even by others on the team that like she personally looks out for her team. And like, if she sees you like on Teams asking questions at 10 o'clock at night, she's going to be like, hey, dude, what are you doing? Go hang with your family, man. Like, get with it. So I really appreciate that. And I know, John, I'm like you, I can get into something and just go. And I need people around me to help me. Hey, come up for air, Ryan, like get after it. And you're right. It sometimes it's really hard to find that balance.
Yeah. And I think having a leader like that, like you just explained, is very, very, very important.
For sure.
Yeah.
Because some leaders, they capitalize on that. They will, if they know you're going to work extra hours and not, get paid extra for it, they are going to jump on that. And they'll run you into the ground until you're burnt out and leave, and then they'll just find the next person who's willing to work for free.
No, I completely agree with that. So, I've really, I think we've all three of us have probably suffered with this of overworking and putting work first, and it's just like what John's question earlier. Like it's so difficult to separate passion because we all love what we do, right? From actually you just being away and turning into a workaholic and can you actually walk away? I did have an incident probably about a year ago now, actually, where I was really like killing myself over a project that I was running by myself, and it got to the point where I just absolutely lost it with somebody I was driving past when they cut me up, and it just wasn't me. It was just a complete attitude shift. I was just like, I need to do something about this. And we've talked on the show before about managing time and having like a set schedule. We talked to Chris Huntingford the other day. He was talking about that as well. So it's so important to set those boundaries. And it's great that you've now got an employer. You had an employer here, but you've also got a new employer that understands that and understands that you need to have those boundaries in place. And it's good that they support you in that.
Absolutely.
Right, I'm conscious of time. I think
100%.
we're going to have to wrap the show up because you've got to start your is it day 3 now? Day 3, yeah.
Day 3. Day
Well, if you're passing
3.
Shane,
Nice. I'm really
if you're
happy for
passing
you,
by
Ryan. That's
Shane's
awesome.
office, ask him if he
Really
wants to be a
pleased
guest
to
on the
see you,
show.
man. It's great.
So if you're passing
Well,
Shane's
say that
office,
again.
just ask him if he wants to be on the show.
Absolutely, man. I will put in a good word for sure, man.
Awesome.
You guys
Thank
are
you
rock
very much.
stars.
So you can find Ryan Johnston and his fantastic hair on LinkedIn and his YouTube channel, Power Platform Ryan. Links to resources mentioned in this episode will be in the show notes. Music today was provided by Ken Like Fit. You can find his music on Spotify, the link to which you can find in this episode's show notes. Additional music used in this episode is also credited there. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss the next episode. We would also really appreciate it if you gave us a follow on LinkedIn. And if you are enjoying the podcast, please give us a review on your chosen podcast platform. Thank you. This has been Sprint Zero, and we've been John Russell. Say goodbye, John.
See you later. Nice to talk to you, Ryan.
Ryan Johnston, say goodbye, Ryan.
Hey, see you guys. Thanks so much.
And according to the show notes, I'm John, but I'm actually Mike, and I'll see you in the next episode. Love you, Mark.
Love you, Lewis.
Thanks.
I love it. Well
Love you, John.
done.
Warning. The following scenes may contain references to power pages and portals which some listeners may find disturbing. Especially if you've struggled with poor training in the past.
Hey all, Franco Musso here again. Quick update on that hostage situation. Hopefully the smell isn't coming across the airwaves. I haven't let the guys use the bathroom yet, so the joke's definitely on me. Anyway, big announcement. I'm finally releasing my online Power Pages course. This has been 5 years in the making. It's tried and tested on citizen devs and portal makers all around the world. It's the course I wish existed when I was getting started. It's practical, it's hands-on, and it's project-based, so you're not wondering how the heck this would apply to the real world. I've built in battle-tested lessons I've learned from tens of successful portal projects across various industries, budgets and geographies, and I've formulated the most efficient route from zero to heroic launch. The tools and techniques I've chosen to show you are all based on what adds the most value to you, the learner, and to your customers, all in the most compressed timeline possible. Think 80-20, focusing on the techniques that punch above their weight and deliver the majority of results. You'll get video lessons, a repeatable framework, and some super helpful worksheets. Visit francomusso.com/power-pages-course and register your interest. Disclaimer, this course isn't for you if you prefer hours of slides, theory, and little to no action. You can now take your fingers out of your ears and enjoy the awesome that is Sprint Zero.